Welcome to chapter 3, everyone. In this chapter, we are going to be digging in, pun intended, to the topics of soil and biogeochemical cycles. And these are two very important topics in environmental science, and you're going to find that they are related to multiple other chapters that we will be covering in the future, such as our next chapter on agriculture and our future chapters on water and on atmosphere. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to, first of all, describe what soil is and the major constituents, meaning what soil is made of, explain soil acidity, alkalinity, and salinity, classify the different soil phases, explain the carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur cycles, meaning how these nutrients flow through the biosphere, and explain how plants use and interact with soil and what nutrients they acquire from it. So as usual, we will start by tackling the first, most basic learning outcome, what is soil? You probably already have an intuitive sense of what soil is. It's the matter found on the immediate surface of the earth, and it consists of multiple different components. There's mineral matter. You might think of this as the dirt. There are 3 types of mineral matter, which are sand, silt, and clay. And we'll talk more about each of these in a moment. Soil also contains decaying organic matter, so dead, decaying plants and animals. The technical term for this is humus. Then between all of these particles of mineral matter and organic matter are pores, and those pores are filled with water or air. And how much water and how much air varies depending upon the soil type. And then lastly, among all of these things, soil also contains living organisms, such as microscopic organisms and insects that inhabit the soil. The soil is its own ecosystem. So these are the standard features in the composition of soil, but not all soils are the same. There are many different types of soils, and we'll get into that in a moment. But before we do, a brief aside on the importance of the role that soil plays in the environment. So soil is crucial for life on Earth. As you probably know, soil provides plants with nutrients as well as a place to anchor their roots and grow. And of course, plants are the producers that the rest of the ecosystem relies upon as the gateway for new energy to enter the ecosystem via the sun. Soil also plays other roles in the biosphere. It filters water and air. It stores and recycles carbon. And in a later section of this chapter, we will also be talking about the carbon cycle. And it recycles other nutrients as well. So, needless to say, soil is a very important resource. And to fully understand how it functions as this resource, we need to know a bit about the parts that compose it and also where it comes from and how it's created. So, the formation of soil is a long process, and it's both biological and geological in nature. It involves transforming rocks and organic materials into this complex, multi-part material that we know as soil. The process starts with what's called weathering of the parent material. The parent material is the matter that the soil originates from. So often this is the solid bedrock that underlays the geography of the region. And weathering occurs as a result of many factors simultaneously, which you'll see listed here. These include freezing and thawing, erosion of the material by wind and water, and the invasion of plant roots that actually penetrate the parent material and break it up into smaller pieces. As the parent material breaks down and organic matter begins to accumulate, the soil begins to form these distinct layers that are called horizons. You can see them notated here in this illustration. And these layers are distinguished both by what they are composed of and where they are located in the soil. The topmost layer of the soil is called the O horizon. O stands for organic, so this is the organic layer. It's made of organic materials that are in various stages of decay, so things like fallen leaves, dead plants, etc. And not all soils have an O horizon. In the case of a lot of agricultural operations, the O horizon is totally stripped away by plowing, and it leaves that top layer totally bare, lacking an O horizon at all. Beneath the O horizon is the A horizon, which is also known as the topsoil. This layer is a blend of organic material and mineral particles. It's also often rich with microorganisms, and this is the primary layer that supports the growth of plants. Next down is the E horizon, or the alluviation leaching zone. The word alluviation is used to refer to the washing out of materials, primarily minerals and nutrients from the soil by water. So the alluviation zone is this area below the A horizon that's marked by sort of a bleached appearance. You can see that in the figure on the right, because in this stripe, the nutrients have been washed out as water makes its way deeper into the soil profile. And not all soils have this E horizon. It's a feature of soils that have good drainage. And also in agricultural fields, if plowing takes place, then often the E horizon gets mixed up with the A horizon, and you don't have those distinct E and A horizons separated from each other. Moving down from the E horizon is the B horizon. This is called the subsoil. The subsoil is where the stuff that has leached out of the A horizon and passed through the E horizon accumulates. And then finally, below the B horizon is the C horizon, or the parent material. This is the source of the mineral material. So this is where the clay, the sand, and the silt come from. And these things mix with the organic material in the above layers. And an important feature to note in this diagram, on the left diagram at least, is you can see how beneath the parent rock, beneath the parent material, is the unweathered bedrock. So whereas this illustration kind of makes it seem like soil formation takes place in a geographic area and then you have soil forever. That's not how it works at all. Soil formation is a continuous process that is always happening. So the O and A layers get washed away by erosion, and the parent material and the subsoil continue to undergo weathering, and this turns into the new O and A layers. And all of this happens very, very gradually, but nonetheless continuously over the course of decades and even centuries. So now that we understand where soil comes from, we are going to transition to talking about what it's made of in a bit more detail. And we can think about soil as being divided into three separate, what are called phases: a solid phase, a liquid phase, and a gaseous phase. Organic and mineral material are both considered to be part of the solid phase of soil because they're made of solid matter. The liquid phase of soil, unsurprisingly, is the water that's found in the pores between solid particles. And the gas phase of soil is the air that's found in the pores between particles. And we're going to look at each of these components one by one. In the figure on the right, you can get a sense of sort of the division of space and these different phases, how much of the space is occupied by the three different phases of soil and their constituent parts. So we're going to start with the mineral material, which is one of the two pieces that make up the solid phase. And as we've said, the mineral material is what we might think of as the dirt. And there are three major categories of mineral material, and those are sand, silt, and clay. And these three categories differ based on their size, and then their size variation in turn imparts certain qualities on the soil. So sand is the largest of the three particles. It ranges from 50 to 2,000 micrometers in diameter. And the upper range, the upper end of that range, the 2,000 micrometers, that's about the thickness of a nickel, to give you perspective. Silt is mid-range in size, 2 to 50 micrometers in diameter. And then clay has the smallest of these three particles. Clay particles are less than 2 micrometers, which is about the diameter of a single bacterium, so very, very small. And as you can see in the figure on the right, you can see a size comparison between the three different particles. And also, there's an illustration that shows you how the different sizes of the particles cause these materials to pack together differently. With sand, there is a lot of space between the particles, and this means that if you have a soil where the mineral portion contains a high level of sand, the soil will have good drainage, but consequently, it will have poor water and nutrient retention because water and nutrients will flow right through. A silty soil, being mid range in particle size, has moderate drainage and retention of water and nutrients, while a soil that's rich in clay has poor drainage because the clay particles are so small they pack together very tightly without much space in between. But on the other hand, clay also retains water and nutrients very well. In reality, almost no soil is pure clay, silt, or sand. Soils are generally a blend of these three things in varying proportions. So, this means that there aren't just three types of minerals, but rather there are many types of soil texture that represent different proportions of the three mineral forms. And there's this graphical tool called the soil texture triangle that is used to classify a soil based on these proportions. And to use the soil texture triangle, you need to first know the percentage makeup of your soil in terms of the three mineral components. And this can be done very precisely with laboratory testing, or it can be done more roughly with a simple home test where you put a sample of soil in a glass jar with water and let it settle. And as it settles, then it will settle into three distinct layers. So the largest particles, the sand, will be on the bottom, and then above that will be the silt, and then the clay particles will be on the very top. And this can give you a breakdown of the percentages of each mineral. So if the soil has 10% clay, 30% silt, and 60% sand, as in this example that you see on the left, then what you do is you find the 10% on the side that corresponds to the clay, you find the 30% on the side that corresponds to the silt, and the 60% on the side for the sand. Then you follow the lines that are on the grid in the triangle until you find the point where they intersect. And wherever you land is the classification of the soil. So the one in this example would be considered a sandy loam soil. Now, why does this all matter? Well, soil texture has consequences for what types of plants grow well in that soil and therefore for agriculture. Plants that thrive in a well-drained soil are not going to do well in clay, while plants that need a high level of nutrient concentration will not like sand. And while this isn't a universal rule, soils that are in the loam texture classification are generally considered to be ideal for many agricultural purposes because they have a good balance of the qualities of the three different mineral types. Now remember that minerals, which we've been talking about, are just one of the two pieces of soil solid phase. The other part is the organic material. So there's three things that are considered part of the organic material of soil. The first is live biomass. So in other words, the still living organisms such as plant roots and microbes whose habitat is the soil. Second is recognizable dead matter, meaning dead plants and animal remains that haven't fully decomposed. Fallen leaves would be an example of this. And then lastly, there's humic substances or just humus. Humus is what you get when organic matter fully decomposes. It's dark, it's rich, it's fertile, it's full of nutrients. This is what you see pictured in the image here, the humus. Okay, moving on to the next phase of soil. The liquid phase refers to the water that you find in soil and the stuff that's dissolved in that water. Water is crucial to soil for many reasons, including the fact that it supplies plants with water, it regulates the temperature of the soil and keeps it from reaching extreme high or low temperatures. You may remember back from chapter 2, we talked about water has this unique quality of being able to maintain stable temperatures. It provides a habitat for microscopic organisms in the soil. It buffers plants from exposure to harmful chemicals, and it serves to transport nutrients through the soil as a medium. So water is very, very important. And while we're on the topic of the water portion of soils, one factor that is important to discuss is soil salinity. So salinity is the technical term for salt concentration. And the salt concentration found in a soil has an influence on how well the plants growing in that soil can absorb water and nutrients. In particular, Soils that have very high salinity, like the one that you see in this image here, where the salinity is so high that a salt crust has actually developed over the top of the field. These types of soils are characterized by poor nutrient absorption by the plants that live in them. So, why does salt have this effect? Well, the simplified explanation is that many essential nutrients that plants need to survive are ions. This includes calcium, magnesium, potassium, and ammonium. Remember from chapter 2, ions are particles with an electric charge. And salts are also ions. They're made of ions, they're ionic molecules. So when you get a really high concentration of salts in the soil, there is such a sheer volume of ions that the balance is thrown out of whack and plants can't access the essential important ions that they need, nor can they properly absorb water out of the soil under those conditions. Another factor that can impact the absorption of water and nutrients by the plants living in a soil is pH. Because remember, pH is essentially a measurement of ions as well, specifically hydrogen ions. So, too many or too few hydrogen ions, and the balance can be disrupted, and the plant finds itself unable to absorb water and those essential nutrients. This pH factor is a little bit more variable though, because some plants are well adapted to soils that have either an acidic or basic pH level. So, for example, blueberry bushes prefer an acidic soil with a pH around 5 or less. But here in Arizona, our soil is actually basic, it's not acidic. As you can see from this map here of the globe that lays out the different soil pH ranges in regions, you can see that we are in the blue region that is basic soil. So the only way that you can successfully grow a fruiting blueberry bush in Arizona is by putting it in a pot with special acidic soil, because the native soil that you find here with its basic pH will not allow that blueberry bush to thrive. The last dimension of the phases of soil that we need to talk about is the gas phase, or in other words, air. So, in a soil that is well aerated, the air that you find in the pores between the particles of the soil's solid phase look more or less like the same air that's in the atmosphere. So, that means it's mostly made of nitrogen with also a significant amount of oxygen and also carbon dioxide. And that's because gases will readily move in and out of the pores found in soil through a process called diffusion, the movement of molecules from areas of high concentration to low concentration. So, if the air content in the soil is being depleted by the metabolism of soil organisms, as long as the soil is well aerated, then more gas will move in and replenish the gas that's being used up. However, in soil that is not well aerated, such as soil that has a high proportion of clay minerals or soil that is waterlogged, like what you see here in this photo, the proportions of gases can look a lot different because the metabolism of the living organisms in the soil will absorb certain gases, but fresh new gases from the atmosphere won't be able to flow in and replace them. For example, the bacteria and other heterotrophic microorganisms in the soil, as well as the roots of plants, will go about their normal metabolism, conducting the process of cellular respiration, which we talked about previously, to extract energy from carbohydrates. And you may remember that cellular respiration uses oxygen as an ingredient. So the oxygen in the soil pores will get used up, but if there's poor airflow in the soil, then it won't be replenished, and that can spell death for the plants and many of the other organisms that live in that soil. So, this is why having well aerated soil is so important for agriculture, and practices like tilling the soil or adding sources of organic matter that break up the mineral component and increase the size of the pores in the soil, like adding compost or manure, for example. These are a couple of practices that promote better aeration.